Chapter 15. He and Michaeline had been waiting for nearly an hour or so for Lissaka to get ready. All of the good mood that he had this morning evaporated like water atop the sun-heated stone. He sat there in the main entrance with Michaeline, doing literally nothing as they waited. Duran turned to look at him and raised an eyebrow. "Do you think something has happened to her?" he asked. And Michaeline looked over at him with only a slight bit of the resentment he had been glaring at him all morning. "No," he sighed, as he settled back on the stairs in a more comfortable position, his elbows behind him resting on the step as he leaned back. "In case you haven't noticed, she is a woman. They tend to take longer to get ready, though she tends to be better than most." He paused as though considering his words. "Well, I assume anyway. I don't tend to stick around and wait for them to dress," he said with a smile. "It is a little odd, though. She is taking more time than usual. So, should we? Nah. Never interrupt a woman getting ready. That's just a goddess-cursed idea there." Duran thought back to the way Lissaka had looked at him that morning and shuddered. The mere memory of that icy blue eye promising death, and more so painful death, was forever burned into his mind. He was about to say something when he heard feet upon the stairs and turned to look, and then probably forgot everything he had been about to say, and, well, everything else that had been in his head mere seconds ago. Lissaka was standing there. She was dressed in her order raiment. Her hair was done up in a ponytail, but somehow different from how she usually had it. He just couldn't quite put his finger on it, but whatever it was, he liked it. And her skin, which was normally a rather pretty shade of tan, somehow seemed to glow slightly, with a subtle reddish hue. He hadn't noticed that he had been staring at her until Michaeline nudged him with a grin on his face, and leaned in conspiratorially. "I have never seen her put on makeup before. At least not when her mother hasn't demanded her put it on for some social event or another." He laughed. "I remember this one time. They literally had to hold her down and stuff her in a dress, and..." Lissaka's ears twitched, and her eyes narrowed dangerously at Michaeline, despite the fact that she was much too far away to hear them. Or was she? Duran would have to test the range of her hearing. Those feline ears might be better at picking up noise than he had initially thought. Duran knew he was staring, but found he didn't care. He watched as she stepped down the stairs, his eyes following her all the way down until she was standing on the landing in front of him. "Ready to go?" she asked, as though she had been the one waiting for him. He opened his mouth to respond and then thought better of it. Sure, she had taken extra time to get ready, a full half hour, but goddess be praised it was an hour well spent in Duran's opinion. He made a mental note that he would need to wake her a half hour early every day so that they were not late. Nodding, he made his way towards the main door, intent on pushing the pace quickly so that they could potentially reach the gate without being too tardy. As he stepped towards the door, the house steward stepped out of a hall to the side and stood in his way, clearing his throat. Duran, taking a deep breath to restrain the anger he felt at yet another delay, forced it out, a half-polite, not trusting himself to say any actual words. They would likely come out curt, and this man had not done anything to deserve his ire. "Master Duran, I regret to inform you that Master Galen does not want you to leave his house," he said, bowing slightly. "Please inform Master Galen that I am leaving," he said, as he moved to walk past the elderly steward. "But, sir..." Duran turned on his heels and smiled at the man. "Hooland, was it?" he asked, and the man nodded. "Unfortunately, we cannot stay. We have order duties to attend to this morning, as we are running a tad bit late," he said. And the steward opened his mouth to speak again, but Duran went on before he could get a word in edgewise. "I'm sure he will understand. One must attend to their duties." He smiled and moved towards the doors, throwing them wide and making his way down the cobbled path towards the gate and the city proper, which once again swung open without Duran even needing to ask. As they made their way down to the gate, Michaeline snagged them some breakfast, which consisted of an ilbas, which was a spiced meat and egg mix wrapped up in a pastry. Everyone was just waking up, meaning there was a small bit of traffic, but not enough to slow their progress appreciatively. After all, Kadala was only a city of 20,000 or so, and the streets, while narrow as they were designed to funnel enemies should the need arise, was wide enough to not impede the foot traffic flow of the people. They got there almost an hour or so after sunrise. The caravan, which consisted of 2 wagons, identical to the 2 that Duran had seen on the road outside of Kadala when he had first met Michaeline, and 2 teams of horses, with one as a spare tied behind each wagon. And while the wagons looked to be the same, albeit not smashed or anything, the men did not appear to be the ones from before. He caught Michaeline's eye and motioned to the men, who were still loading boxes and crates on the back of the wagon. "Different men," he said, by way of a question. "Well, yeah," he said with a shrug. "Same company, but..." He paused as he saw Duran's eyebrow raise, and then nodded to himself, and went on explaining. Yeah, the order contracts out with a group called the Himorian Trade Company. It is a conglomeration of merchants who have formed a company and ship practically everywhere. The order's got first priority on their shipping, either by boat or, in this case, by wagon train. We pay them a yearly cost. They make sure that, if we need it, we have wagon space. And we provide protection. It works well for all of us, seeing as they normally need to hire on protection for the caravans, but not when we need space, as we escort all of our own shipments. So, not only are they saving money on hiring muscle, they also get paid for the space. Part of the 20% the order takes goes to this, he said. Durin nodded. It all seemed rather straightforward when put that way. He led the way over to the wagon and gave the man who looked to be in charge a half-bow of sorts. Ah, he said, turning to look at Durin and the others. You must be our escorts. He gave them a sort of apologetic smile. I apologize for this, but there is a slight delay. One of the leaf springs on this wagon here snapped on us, and we just got the replacement half-hour ago, so we are just now loading the cargo. I see, Durin said with a nod. Do you have an estimate on the time it will take to finish loading? He asked. Half an hour, I'd say. Durin nodded, though in his head he was fighting really, really hard to tamp down his anger. Normally we are the ones waiting for you order members, he said with a laugh. Durin smiled and nodded at the wagoneer and was eventually able to extricate himself and his companions. Want to do some light sparring? He asked, looking first at Lissaka, then at Michaeline, both of whom raised their eyebrows at him. Sure, Michaeline said. Light, right? I clearly heard you say light, so... Yeah, Durin said, pulling off his pack. He laid his pack on the ground, making sure to set it against the fountain's retaining wall right beneath the foot of a carved hunting dog that decorated the side. Michaeline pulled out his blade and rolled his shoulders, loosening them up before squaring off against Durin. Durin had seen his sword before when he had first met Michaeline, but seeing as that was not his focus during that encounter, he had not paid attention to it other than to note that it was indeed a sword. His blade was a falchion of the two-handed variety. It had a standard round disc pommel with a slightly curved crossguard and a leather hilt that had been dyed deep forest green. The thing that caught Durin's eye, however, was the blade itself. Like all falchions, this one started out straight before curving elegantly into a rather sharp point that could still be used quite effectively for thrusting. The back of the blade, along its unsharpened edge, had not one but 2 points on the spine of the blade, giving Durin the impression of waves of water in a lake. The fuller only went from crossguard to the first spine's crest. All in all, it looked to be quite the well-made two-handler. Simple, but elegant for its simplicity. Durin drew his blade and bowed to him. Michaeline bowing back to him. They both fell into stance, Durin choosing mid-guard, while Michaeline went with a high guard. As they came closer to one another, Michaeline was the first one to engage, testing Durin's guard with a few quick slashes. Durin caught each one with the flat of his blade, allowing him to slice off his blade as he moved to the side, angling the blade in such a way that there was always a small opening in Michaeline's defences. Not that Durin pressed it. After around 5 or so exchanges, Durin stepped back and nodded to him. You have good form, but you leave yourself open a little too much on the riposte. He fell back into the mid-guard. Do that first attack again. And this time, as Michaeline attacked, Durin responded just like he had before, catching the cut on the flat of his blade and allowing it to angle down with the force of the blow, then twisting his blade up and around Michaeline's and stepping forward, lightly pressing the point of his blade under Michaeline's arm in the armpit area before stepping back. You're overextending. As soon as I catch the blade, you should pull back, redirect the blade instead of following through. Let's try that again. Durin and Michaeline traded blows back and forth for the next half hour or so, Michaeline working up a decent sweat, though Durin looked as fresh as when they had started. Thanks, Michaeline said, slightly out of breath as he wiped his brow and put away his sword. I didn't even know there was an opening like that there. Durin smiled and nodded at him. Unless you are fighting a master swordsman, there is little chance that someone else would be able to exploit it, he said. Both Michaeline and Lissaka decided to not comment on the fact that he had just called himself a swordmaster, seeing as it was becoming more and more apparent that he was indeed, or at least he was near their skill level. Durin turned to look at her, but before he could ask if she wanted to do some sparring, the wagon master came up to them. Begging your pardon for the intrusion, but we are ready to go, he smiled. If you are prepared to leave, then we can head straight for the gate. Sooner started, sooner done, and all that. They all nodded and hopped on the wagons. There was a place for each of them, 2 open spots in the lead wagon and 1 on the rear. Michaeline took the rear before the debate could even get started, a smile curving his lips as he did so, which left Durin and Lissaka in the foremost wagon, sitting rather close side by side. Durin smiled to himself, breathing in deeply and catching her scent. It was a musky smell, strong and sweet, and it made him want to pull her close and breathe in deeply. He resisted that urge and instead leaned back, attempting to casually put an arm around her shoulder. Durin had no idea how casual it all actually looked, because truth be told he didn't feel casual about it. And as his arm came around her shoulder, she stiffened. It took some time for her to relax some, and though she didn't really lean into him, he felt her press a little more against his side as the wagon rolled out to the Cadalian gate.